Om Tavakatamratam Taptajivanam Kavibhiriditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadatatam Bhuvigaranti Bhurirajana. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome everyone to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We're on page 184 in Swami Nityagopal's version of the translation. It's Friday, March 9th, 1883. Actually, we're on page 185. We started this section last week. And Sri Ramakrishna is in his room with Rakhal, M, and a few other devotees. It was the day of the new moon, and the devotee had asked, why has God put us in the world? Okay, now we're right at the middle, towards the middle of the page. During these days, Sri Ramakrishna's heart overflowed with motherly love, like the love Yashoda felt for Krishna. So he kept Rakhal with him. Rakhal felt toward the master as a child feels toward its mother. He would sit leaning on the master's lap as a young child leans on its mother while sucking her breast. This is something with the screen.
Is it recording?
Oh, okay.
Sorry, restart?
No, we can continue. Okay. Sorry for the delay. Technical difficulties. This means that Sri Ramakrishna was in this one of the moods called the vatsalya bhava, and this is something that came upon him, especially whenever he saw Rakhal. You may remember the vision that Thakur had before Rakhal came to him, that a son would be born to him, and then he was very surprised. He said, how can I have a son? I have no relation with my wife. And then he heard the voice of the Divine Mother say, no, it'll be a spiritual son, Manasaputra. So we all understand it that way. Thakur understood it that way, that Rakhal had that special relationship with Sri Ramakrishna. We call all of them Thakur Shontan. All of them are his children. But this was in a very special sense, that he looked upon Rakhal not just as his child, but as a small child. So he would get into this mood, just as Mother Yashoda used to look upon the baby Gopal as God himself. Thakur would get that feeling, and both would get into that mood. So Thakur was looking upon Rakhal, who was then probably, 20 years old, and big and strong, and yet he would sit on Thakur's lap as if he were a small child. It didn't seem strange to either of them, because he looked upon Thakur, you could say as his mother. We don't know exactly if that was his mood, that it was the mood of Swami Shivananda, but in any event, he would feel like a small child in the presence of Sri Ramakrishna, and Thakur, from his side, would get that motherly mood. So Thakur would have different moods at different times. We may wonder, how can he think of himself as a mother of a small child and at the same time think of himself as a child of the Divine Mother? But his mind was very flexible and elastic and would go from one mood to another. This is one of the astounding features in Thakur's life. We find so many other great souls, they'll have one mood and they'll attain perfection in that mood, and that'll last throughout the whole lifetime. But Thakur, he went from one to another. He practiced all of them, the different attitudes and different moods. Generally, his overriding attitude was that of a child to the mother. But during this period of time, and specifically when Rakhal would come, he would get into that mood. Now when Gopal or Ma would come, then the reverse would happen. He would think of himself automatically as the baby Gopal, and sometimes would even crawl on the ground in her presence. So things triggered different moods and attitudes in the mind of Sri Ramakrishna. And so this would have been a very odd sight for people to see. There's this 20-year-old man, fully grown, sitting on the lap of Sri Ramakrishna, and as if it's a small child sitting on the lap of his mother. And neither one felt it to be anything unusual because they were in that mood. They're not in an ordinary mood at this time. Rakhal was thus seated by the master when a man entered the room and said that a high tide was coming in the Ganges. This was always a big event. I don't know why they thought it was something so special, but a high tide really meant that the waves would come over, and sometimes the part of the embankment would break off. So it was some special thing. I don't know how often it came. Of course, there'd be a high tide every day, and every month there'll be something, but this was some special thing that they all used to run and try to see. The master and the devotees ran to the Panchavati to see it. At the sight of a boat being tossed by the tide, Sri Ramakrishna exclaimed, "Look, look, I hope nothing happens to it." Because the Ganges there is not terribly far from the ocean. So that means that sometimes the water is flowing north and sometimes it's flowing south, if the ocean water is coming up or going back. So this was the special thing that people like to see. They all sat in the Panchavati. The master asked M to explain the cause of the tide. M drew on the ground the figures of the sun, moon, and earth and tried to explain gravitation, ebb tide, flood tide, new moon, full moon, eclipse, and so forth. Now, we have this idea, we hear very often that if one attains the perfect knowledge, then one is sarvagya. One is all-knowing. And some people think that that means that even scientific facts, that someone will know everything. It doesn't mean that at all. Thakur is the perfect illustration. He was all-knowing, and yet he could barely do addition. He could add okay, he couldn't subtract very well. Multiplication, he couldn't do it all. And this high moon and this tide and everything was too much for him. His mind couldn't grasp these things. His mind was on a different level. So the master told him, "Stop it. I can't follow you. It makes me dizzy. My head is aching." Well, how can they know of things so far off? See, he was a village boy. We have to always keep that in mind. And never really cared for school. He used to skip his classes and with some of his friends go to the mango grove, and they would put on plays and sing and dance and do all of that. So is that right brain or left brain? He was one of them, huh? One of them. He didn't have that mathematical side, but the intuitive side, of course, was off the charts. And then he says, "You see, during my childhood I could paint well, but arithmetic would make my head spin. I couldn't learn simple arithmetic." Sri Ramakrishna returned to his room with the devotees. Looking at a picture of Yashoda on the wall, he said, "It is not well done. She looks like a garland seller." The master enjoyed a nap after his noon meal. Adhar and other devotees gradually gathered. This was Adhar's first visit. He was a deputy magistrate and about 30 years old. Now, I personally find it interesting if we know a little bit about the actors in this play that Sri Ramakrishna put on. And Adhar is a very important actor in this play. He had a very intimate, close relationship with Sri Ramakrishna. So I just want to read a little bit. There's something called Bhakti Porichoy in the Bengali version, which is very nice, that all of the important people that we come across, devotees, and relatives of Sri Ramakrishna that we come across in the gospel, there's a little description about them. So I thought I would just tell us a little bit about Adhar Lal Sen was his full name. He was then what, 30 years old? Is that what I said? Okay. So he came from a well-to-do family. He was very intelligent. In the beginning of his life, that he was an atheist. Then he met Thakur when he was 28, it says here anyhow, and he became a great devotee. At the first sight of Thakur, he felt this tremendous attraction towards him. Then one day, Thakur initiated him. He wrote something, this was his typical initiation. He wrote the Ishta mantra on his tongue. And in an ecstatic mood, he placed his hand on Adhar's chest and on his head and blessed him that way. Then gradually, Adhar went into, had some high spiritual experience and became fully overwhelmed with all of that. Thakur went to his house many times and went into samadhi during kirtan there. Thakur looked upon Adhar as Narayan himself, so he had a very high opinion of him. He was talented in many different fields, and he worked very hard. One thing we'll see throughout the gospel, that as a deputy magistrate, he earned a good salary and was highly respected, but he had a chance for a very big position to make a lot more money. And this is an ongoing tension between them, that how much should he try and how much should he go to this person and that person and flatter them to get recommendations so we can get this big position. Thakur saw Bankim Chandra at his house also. But at the age of 30, suddenly one day, he fell off the back of a horse, horseback riding, and died suddenly. So a very, very tragic death at a young age. Then at this time also, when after he fell off the horse, Thakur went to see him, and with tears in his eyes also touched him and blessed him. So this is Adhar Sen. See, sometimes we get a wrong impression that we'll see him criticizing him so much. Why do you care about this so much? Getting a better job and everything, and he argues, well, how about Narendra? If he gets a chance for a better job, is it okay for him? They go back and forth. This is only because Thakur saw that he was so qualified as a spiritual aspirant. The same thing happens with Ishan Mukhopadhyay. We read this chapter and we think, Thakur was scolding him so much, but we have to understand he's doing it because he loved him so much and had such high regard and respect for him. He was such a generous, wonderful person. So it's good for us to realize this relationship, and then we can understand that in the midst of Thakur kind of scolding him, that the tremendous love and affection is there behind it. Okay, so this was Adhar's first visit. He was a deputy magistrate and about 30 years old. So M doesn't know exactly his age at this time. He was probably a couple years younger than that, and died within a couple of years. Adhar to the master: Sir, I have a question to ask. Is it good to sacrifice animals before the deity? Now remember, this is his first visit. That means he's coming without too much devotion. We read there that he was an atheist at a young age, and that he felt this tremendous attraction to Sri Ramakrishna at the first visit. So now he's asking a very mundane type of question, because probably he's not at the point where he wants to ask, how can I realize God? It'll come, of course. But so he's asking about sacrificing animals, a very standard question for the educated people of Calcutta at that time, that were influenced by the Brahmo Samaj and reformers and everything. It certainly involves killing. And Adhar, of course, will know that he's come to a Kali temple where they have what they call Bolidan, where they will sacrifice a goat to the Divine Mother and then distribute it as prasad. Master, the Shastra prescribes sacrifice on special occasions. He's not going to give a very strong opinion. Thakur always said that he came not to destroy, that his goal wasn't, he didn't come as a social reformer. He came to bring spirituality to the world. So he's not going to take a very strong stance, but he says, Shastra, that means the scriptures, prescribe sacrifice on special occasions. Such sacrifice is not harmful. Take, for instance, the sacrifice of a goat on the 8th day of the full or new moon. Now, remember that this is a part of India where goat meat was very commonly taken. So whether it's offered to the Divine Mother or not, these goats were raised to get slaughtered. There wasn't, they didn't do too much else. Huh? You couldn't shear them and knit things and everything. I guess you can, huh? Goat hair. You can. They do with some fancy thing in Kashmir that's partly goat and what's it called? Begins with a P. Anyhow, but the main function, the reason if you go to India and you see goats running all around, it's because they're going to, that'll be their food. So if they're going to slaughter them anyhow, then at least now they're trying to bring in some spiritual side to it, at least. So he says the sacrifice of a goat on the 8th day of the full or new moon, he says is not harmful. But now he'll talk about himself. So this is kind of a very standard thing that he's saying. That means he's living in the Kali temple. He's not going to start have some protest movement that they should stop this animal sacrifice or anything like that. But he says, I am now in such a state of mind that I cannot watch a sacrifice. Also, I cannot eat meat offered to the Divine Mother. Therefore, I first touch my finger to it, then to my head, lest she should be angry with me. Yeah, Thakur, he went through different moods. He said at one time, I can't cut a lemon with a knife without having to say first Om Kali, something like that. So he would go through different moods. Again, in a certain state of mind, I see God in all beings, even in an ant. At that time, if I see a living being die, I find consolation in the thought that it is the death of the body, the soul being beyond life and death. So M one day heard all of these teachings and thought God dwells within all beings, that he should be very cautious about things. So he told Sri Ramakrishna that, yes, sometimes when I'm eating, they would eat on the floor, and very often fish, he said, cat would come and start eating off the plate, and I can't do anything. And Thakur said, what do you mean you can't do anything? You can even give it a slap to push it away. And then, was it M or somebody else who came asking about, is it okay even to kill insects and things like that? And saw at that time, Thakur was taking his mattress and beating it and killing all of the bed bugs. So Thakur had different moods. There were times when he saw life in a blade of grass to such an extent that he couldn't walk on the grass. At other times he would do it. So it depended on the particular mood that he was in. One should not reason too much. It is enough if one loves the lotus feet of the mother. So he's really telling Adhar, okay, you've come here, you asked a question, I gave some kind of answer, but these aren't the things to occupy your mind with. That if you're really serious about this, then you should try to develop some type of devotion. One should not reason too much. It is enough if one loves the lotus feet of the mother. Too much reasoning throws the mind into confusion. You get clear water if you drink from the surface of a pond. Put your hand deeper and stir the water and it becomes muddy. Therefore pray to God for devotion. Now, Thakur, he, even at the first visit, he had some type of sixth sense where just seeing someone, he could tell if they had a mind that tended towards devotion or tended towards meditation or knowledge or what. So he must know this about Adhar. I was reading the other day, somebody was saying that when all the direct disciples would be there, Thakur will be talking about nothing but knowledge and renunciation. And then M would come into the room, and now again it's Naradiya Bhakti. And he said, so we don't get all of these things in the gospel, because when M was present, M, as much as Thakur loved M and had a high opinion of him, he belonged to the householder stage of life, and he didn't want to confuse his mind too much. Or the problem with M was he had such a longing to renounce everything. So Thakur didn't want to increase that longing, knowing that he had his responsibilities to fulfill. So he's telling him, pray for devotion. Behind Dhruva's devotion, there was desire. He practiced austerities to gain his father's kingdom. But Prahlada's love for God was motiveless, a love that sought no return. A devotee. How can one realize God? Now we're getting a real question. And we know that Thakur has a list of at least half a dozen things. And depending on his mood and depending on whom he's talking to, he'll give a different type of answer. So now he says, through that kind of love, so that kind of love means this motiveless love, ahetuki bhakti. He uses this term, ahoituki or ahetuki, both. That means that we don't seek anything. The highest type of love, we read this in the Narada Bhakti Sutras, the highest type of love is and highest type of prayer is to pray for only pure love, is not to seek anything. Even mukti, the real devotee doesn't even pray for liberation, only prays for love. So this is considered the highest type of love in the scriptures and according to Sri Ramakrishna also. Now he makes a very nice statement that we'll find repeated many, many times. But one must force one's demand on God. One should be able to say, O God, wilt thou not reveal thyself to me? I will cut my throat with a knife. This is the tamas of bhakti. Thakur gives two different illustrations of this attitude, very, very different illustrations for different types of people. One, he says, this is the bhakti of the dacoit, that they'll fall upon their victims and they'll beat them and say, you have to give me all of your money or I'll kill you. So this is one type of forcing demand. The other is called Abdar Kora, and it means like a small child always tugging at the mother. Mommy, I have to have this, please give it to me, please give it to me. I won't be able to live without it, and starts crying and weeping and like a small child. This is also forcing demand on God. So he gives both of these different illustrations that depending on our attitude, if we're more of a heroic nature, then we'll take what he calls this tamas of bhakti, like the dacoit. And if we have this more childlike nature, then because he says that if we keep pestering the mother, then finally she'll say, oh, okay, let me make the child happy, and she'll give in and she'll give whatever the child wants. So he likes both of these attitudes. We say generally tamas is a bad thing, but Thakur always knew how to utilize and give a twist to things. If we have this tamasic attitude within us, we can even turn that towards God and turn that into something positive. Devotee, can one see God? Okay, now, again, we're stuck with these words that are the best way that we can convey a meaning and yet aren't completely appropriate. We only know vision with regard to physical seeing with the eyes. Now, can we see God with these physical eyes? Generally, we have to say no. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, he would have visions, of course, with his eyes open. That's a different thing. But talking about seeing God, Thakur would say that the mind has to rise to a very high level. At that very high level, we have some type of direct experience which comes to us as something very, very tangible. We don't know how to explain it, because we explain things with this ordinary mind. So it's not just this pure mind, but the mind that ascends to a different level, where we don't see things. We see things the way we see them because the mind is at a certain level and the senses are functioning in a particular way. When the mind goes to a higher level, then one can have different visions, and one can have some direct experience that doesn't even involve subject and object. There's no distinction at that time. So Thakur said, yes, surely one can see. So we can say realize both aspects of God, God with form and without form. How do we see the formless God? We only know how to see things with form. So he's obviously not talking about sight the way we understand sight. But we can have the direct realization of the formless absolute as our very own self. Well, if we think of the illustration of the pond and taking water out of the pond using a different container. Every experience of God with form will be like taking God in a particular size and shape container. The water takes that shape, and we have a different name for it. Pani or jal or water, or whatever the name is, and the shape will be according to the container, whether it's a bucket or a pitcher or a pouch, whatever it is. Every experience of God that way has to have a particular form and has to have a particular name. If we want to experience the formless, then we dive into the pond. That's all. We dive into it. We can't. If we want to take it out, then that means it has to take the shape of the mind. It'll take some particular form. The experience of the formless has to be oneness. We have to attain to that state of tanmaya, where we become merged in that. So that will be experiencing, we can say, God without form. One can see God with form, the embodiment of spirit. Again, God can be directly perceived as a man with a tangible form. Seeing an incarnation of God is the same as seeing God himself. God is born on earth as man in every age. Now, Thakur also says that worshipping the avatar is the same as worshipping God. Or we can say we get the same result from it. Swami Swananji had a very nice way of expressing this. I always got a kick out of it because it's kind of a double meaning. He would say the avatar is as good as God. Is as good as God. If you want to repeat the name of the avatar, repeating the name of God. You have a vision of the avatar, having a vision of God. But it also means it has the same goodness, the same qualities. As good as God, the avatar. Or worshipping it as good, as an equivalent to the worship of God. So we may wonder if our meditation we're trying to picture the image of the avatar. And is this really meditating on God? God is infinite, absolute, nameless, formless reality. Thakur is saying that you'll get the same result from it. But we have to understand that it's not an ordinary person. If we see the divine qualities within and know that it's a special manifestation. So, God is born on earth as man in every age. The standard explanation is for the sake of dharma. The devotee's explanation is for the sake of the devotee, so that the devotee has some tangible form to worship. Thakur says the avatar comes in order to bring bhakti to the world, not for the sake of dharma. That's also there. That's, of course, a big part of the theory, the idea of the avatar, especially from Gita, but the devotee has a little bit of a different view. The avatar comes from time to time to revive this, not just dharma, but this whole devotional mood and attitude in the world. Okay, that's the end of that day. The next day that we come to is March 11th. So this is 2 days later. This will be a Sunday, March 11th, 1883, and it's Ramakrishna's birthday. So it's very fortunate that because it's a Sunday, more devotees can come. And they celebrated his birthday every year. Now, We always hear that, oh, in India we don't celebrate birthdays. Huh? We hear that all the time. Some people don't even know when they were born. Or Kumar has a birthday every Saturday because he doesn't know when he was born. So we assume that if we do it every Saturday, probably we'll be right. Huh? That it'll catch one of them will be the actual day. But in Sri Ramakrishna's case, they observed his birthday every year and had a special celebration for it. So, it was Sri Ramakrishna's birthday. Many of his disciples and devotees wanted to celebrate the happy occasion at the Dakshineshwar temple garden. From early morning, the devotees streamed in, alone or in parties. After the morning worship in the temples, sweet music was played in the Nahabad. It was spring in Nahabad. We think of this as the place where Holy Mother lived, where Thakur's mother lived, but the whole point of the Nahabad, there was one in the north and one in the south. This is where the musicians would go and go up to the top, usually Chennai, maybe other things also, and would play the music at the time of special occasions or puja or anything like that. So that was specifically for kind of a music tower, you can say. So after the morning worship in the temple, sweet music was played in the Nahabad. It was springtime. The trees, creepers, and plants were covered with new leaves and blossoms. The very air seemed laden with joy, and the hearts of the devotees were glad on this auspicious day. M arrived early in the morning and found the master talking smilingly to Bhavanath, Rakhal, and Kali Krishna. There's a Kali Krishna that we know, of course, who became Swami Virajanandaji, disciple of Holy Mother and monastic disciple of Swamiji, and later president of the order. This is not that same Kali Krishna. That Kali Krishna was then a student of M's, and only came, I don't believe that he ever met Sri Ramakrishna. I don't think so. But he came after Thakur passed away, and of course he actually was the first of the second generation of monks to join the Bharanagar Mutt. So there's a different Kali Krishna. M prostrated himself before Sri Ramakrishna. Master, to M, I'm glad you have come. To the devotees, one cannot be spiritual as long as one has shame, hatred, or fear. Loja grina bhoy tin thakte noi. This was a favorite expression of Sri Ramakrishna's. I don't know where it comes from. He had so many expressions like this that he must have heard from so many different people, sadhus passing by and everything. And he loved little plays on words. He was very good with these puns and things like that. Elok na pok, he would say. Pash mane pash. He had all sorts of different things, very nice little things. Jay shoy she roy, jay na shoy she na shoy. Very sweet little things that he would say. So, shame, hatred, or fear. Shame, lojja. Now, this doesn't mean modesty. We have to remember that with regard to Holy Mother, that she always used to say, and Thakur also, that modesty is the bhushan, is the adornment of a woman. Huh? That this is the crowning characteristic. To have a little bit of modesty, not a little. And Holy Mother, of course, was the embodiment of modesty. It doesn't mean that. This means being too proud. Shame is a form of pride. Too proud to sing before others, too proud to do this before others. Perhaps they'll criticize me, this and that. It looks like it's a type of humility, but it's the ego of humility. The type of pride is there. That very simple people, suppose they can't sing well, and they like to sing. It won't occur to them that people will laugh at them or anything. Very simple people. They'll just go ahead and do it. They won't care. Others, they'll think, no, what will people say if I get up and I sing and dance? What would they think of me, this and that? So that's what he means, this type of lojja, shame. And then hatred. Hatred is a horrible thing. Hatred and anger, these are two of the most poisonous emotions that we can experience. And really, they can just poison the mind. So this hatred, and then fear. Fear is something that this was the special thing that Swamiji spoke about. There's fearlessness. That what is there to fear if we take this attitude that we don't care what will happen to us. We only want to have this highest God realization. Should we be afraid of anything? Afraid of failure? Afraid of physical harm? Anything? What do we care about any of that? So this timid attitude. So Thakur didn't like. So these three things, loja, grina, bhoy, shame, hatred, or fear. Now, Holy Mother used to say, loja, grina, bhoy, tin takte hoy. You have to have all of these. Now, she was looking at it from the other point of view. She wasn't trying to criticize or go against anything that Thakur said, but a little modesty is good. And not hatred, but we should know whom to stay away from, what type of company that we should avoid, and then fear, and just cautiousness. So we can see both sides of this, but Thakur especially now going to talk about shame, and this is partly directed to M, that Thakur would always get annoyed at M because others would join in the singing and dancing, and M would sit in the corner. He was too shy and too reserved. The sankoch, this is another thing that's considered to be one of the obstacles. Sankoch, it means to shrink away from things, to be reluctant, to not want other people to see us. It's also based on ego, a little bit. If we have no ego, what do we care? People see us or know what we're doing or anything like that. So Thakur, he's saying, especially on this day, on his birthday, that people should abandon all of this. He says, great will be the joy today for those fools who will not sing or dance, mad with God's name, will never attain God. So whenever the very few times that he would actually sing or he would join in the dancing, Thakur would be very happy. He said, even M got up and danced. He'd be very happy. How can one feel any shame or fear when the names of God are sung? Now sing, all of you. Bhavanath and his friend Kali Krishna sang. Thrice blessed is this day of joy. May all of us unite, O Lord, to preach thy true religion here in India's holy land. Thou dwellest in each human heart, thy name resounding everywhere. Fill the four corners of the sky. Today thy devotees proclaim thy boundless majesty. We seek not wealth or friends or fame, O Lord. No other hope is ours. For thee alone thy devotees long with unflagging love. Safe at thy feet, what fear have we of death or danger? We have found the fount of immortality. To thee the victory, O Lord, to thee the victory. Okay, I'm going to make a guess. I don't know anything about this song. I'm going to guess. This may be from the life of Buddha, that Girish had recently composed the play, Buddha Charita, on the life of Buddha, just because this thrice blessed day. This is what we generally associate this with, the birth and the nirvana, the enlightenment of Buddha, and the parinirvana, the final leaving of the body. The Buddha is considered, they all took place on the same date. So it's often called the thrice blessed day. So perhaps, I don't know what else it could be referring to. And everyone was singing Girish's songs. They became very overnight, a big hit. So anyhow, that's my guess. If anybody knows whether I'm right or wrong, send a little note, send an email, or put something in the. If you're watching this on the YouTube, you can always make a comment. As Sri Ramakrishna listened to the song with folded hands, his mind soared to a far-off realm. He remained absorbed in meditation a long time. After a while, Kali Krishna whispered something to Bhavanath. That Kali Krishna wasn't a very close devotee. I don't know too much about him, but mostly he was a friend of Bhavanath. Then he bowed before the master and rose. Sri Ramakrishna was surprised. He asked, "Where are you going?" Bhavanath. He is going away on a little business, a little hesitant to tell what was really happening, and apparently this Kali Krishna himself didn't want to say it also. Bhavanath spoke for him. Bhavanath was bold. He spoke his mind very often. Master, what is it about? Bhavanath. He is going to the Baranagar Working Men's Institute. So who knows what that was? Some union meeting or something. Who knows? Master, it is his bad luck. A stream of bliss will flow here today. He could have enjoyed it, but how unlucky. Sri Ramakrishna did not feel well, so he decided not to bathe in the Ganges. About 9 o'clock, a few jars of water were taken from the river, and with the help of the devotees, he finished his bath on the veranda east of his room. After bathing, the master put on a new wearing cloth, all the while chanting the name of God. Accompanied by 1 or 2 disciples, he walked across the courtyard to the temple of Kali, still chanting her hallowed name. His eyes had an indrawn look like that of a bird hatching her eggs. Okay, I wonder if anybody can see this. Can they see it? Yeah, there's a nice story about this. Thakur liked this image. M is using this image, but it's Thakur's image. That if you want to know what someone looks like when they're absorbed in meditation, then look at the mother bird sitting on the eggs to hatch them. And she has this faraway look, absent gaze in her eyes. And then Sri Ramakrishna said to M, "Can you get me a picture of that?" So sometime later, M, I forget if he got a picture or had one made. But in any event, he got it, and he showed it to the master, and the master was very happy. So on some of the different editions of the Gospel in Bengali, they'll have that either on the cover or on the inside page. This is actually a photograph of a bird. But the very early versions, they have that same original sketch that was done of a bird sitting on the egg. I don't think it's in this one. The 5-volume version, huh? The green 5-volume version is there, and also in the Renderpur version. Yeah, the point is that even if the eyes are open, there's no seeing. There's no seeing because the mind is someplace else. When entering the temple, he prostrated himself before the image and worshipped the Divine Mother. But he did not observe any ritual of worship. Now he would offer flowers and sandal paste at the feet of the image, and now he would put them on his own head. After finishing the worship in his own way, he asked Bhavanath to carry the green coconut that had been offered to the mother. He also visited the images of Radha and Krishna in the Vishnu temple. When the master returned to his room, he found that other devotees had arrived, among them Ram, Nityagopal, and Kedar. Now, last week, when we were reading about March 9th, we found that the same 3 of them were there. So probably they were all staying at Ram's house. That's my guess. Kedar, his work was in Dhaka, and his home was in Halishahar. So when he came to Kolkata, I don't know if he had his own place to stay, but Ram would always let people stay with him. And Nityagopal, we found out last week, was a relative, maybe a distant relative, but a relative of Ram, so he stayed with them quite often. So probably they all came together. They all saluted the master, who greeted them cordially. He said to Nityagopal, "Will you eat something now?" "Yes," the devotee answered. Nityagopal, who was 23 or 24 years old and unmarried, was like a child. His mind was always soaring in the spiritual realm. He visited the master sometimes alone and sometimes in Ram's company. The Master had observed the spiritual state of his mind and had become very fond of him. He remarked now and then that Nityagopal was in the state of a Paramahamsa. Now, what does that mean exactly? Paramahamsa, it has a little bit of a technical meaning, that there are some sannyasins that belong to a kind of Paramahamsa Sampradaya. I don't know exactly what that means, but otherwise it means a very high state of spirituality, which is free from any external marks. This is one of the distinctive features of the Paramahamsa. That's why Thakur himself was called a Paramahamsa. He didn't go around wearing garawa, putting marks on his head. In fact, he was just the opposite. In those days, for a sadhu to wear slippers and to have a shirt and keep his hair at a medium length and a beard, and have a barber cut it and everything, these were not standard things. He remained hidden. So the Paramahamsa is a little bit of a hidden yogi, but it's a state of perfection, a very high state, the Paramahamsa state, considered the highest. So he used to say this Nityagopal, he was in the state of the Paramahamsa. But we'll see that even then he would warn this Nityagopal about certain things. After Nityagopal had finished eating, the Master took him aside and gave him various instructions. Now, we were introduced to this topic last week, and I said that there would be more to it. This is about the relationship that Nityagopal had with a woman devotee. A certain woman, about 31 years old, and a great devotee, often visited Sri Ramakrishna and held him in high respect. She had been much impressed by Nityagopal's spiritual state, and looking upon him as her own son, often invited him to her house. So she had this attitude, this vatsalya bhava attitude. Now there were two different groups. This is probably not so much a group, but one of them where they practiced this madhur bhava, and that would be men and women together. And Thakur said that yes, it's a very nice attitude if it can be done really with a husband and wife, and with a very high mood, and with an exclusive relationship without anybody else. But when it's just male devotee, female devotee, that every chance that they'll fall from this very high ideal. So he warned against that. Then this other one, for somebody, if it's a woman looking upon a small child and feeling that this is a Gopal and feeding the child, that's one thing. But a 23-year-old boy, not a boy, a man, 23-year-old, if she's doing all of these things, and for who knows, maybe he wants him to sit on her lap and all of that, he warned him that anything may happen. So, Master to Nityagopal, do you go there? Nityagopal, like a child, yes I do, she takes me. So he's not claiming much responsibility, that he was like that. If people said do this, he would do that. He was very simple that way. Master, beware, holy man. Shadu Shabdhan. He used to use this expression. Go there once in a great while, but not frequently. Otherwise you will slip from the ideal. Maya is nothing but lust and gold. A holy man must live away from woman. All sink there. See, this 23 years old and unmarried in those days didn't necessarily mean, but quite often would mean, that would remain unmarried. Generally, the marriages were arranged at a younger age at that time, and he had no inclination towards marriage, and Thakur looked upon him as a future sannyasi, the Paramahamsa, so he's giving him advice that he won't give to the others. But as somebody who wants to lead a monastic life, he said, be very cautious about that. All sink there. Even Brahma and Vishnu struggle for life in that whirlpool. Nityagopal listened to these words attentively. M to himself, how strange. This young man has developed the state of a Paramahamsa. That is what the Master says now and then. Is there still a possibility of his falling into danger in spite of his high spiritual state? Now the others, Swamiji and the others, they were not so impressed with this Nityagopal. And perhaps wondered why Thakur thought so highly of him, but also recognized that Thakur himself is warning him. So he was in the state of the Paramahamsa sometimes. So it didn't mean that he was fully established in that, and wasn't really part of the inner circle. This was the thing, that when Thakur had his throat cancer and was staying in Kashipur, this was the sifting of the devotees. They use this term, sifting. That means that someone would fall through the sieve. They would be the intimate inner circle disciples. Then, which really we could really see who belonged to that inner circle, and the ones that didn't make it through, they would be devotees. They would come, they would inquire, they would have regard for Sri Ramakrishna, but not that intimate relationship. This Nityagopal, he really didn't become one of that inner circle. And Bhavanath, who seemed to belong to it fully in the beginning, seemed to drift away a little bit at the end. Everyone noticed it, Thakur himself. So this is M, again, thinking to himself, what an austere rule is laid down for a sadhu. See, this wasn't just Sri Ramakrishna. And we'll see that Chaitanya Deva was even stricter. He was very, very strict with this idea that not having any association for the monastics with women whatsoever. Holy Mother was very strict with some of the women devotees also. And, she said to, Sharala Devi, who became Bharati Prana, she was a child widow. She said, even if God comes in the form of a man, don't look. Don't look at his face. So she was warning him the same way. So it's not just for men. This was that idea that, see, the human constitution is such that there's a natural attraction. That's all. And it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's a natural type of thing. But if one wants to lead a spiritual life, then one has to fight against this natural attraction. Swamiji was very fond of saying that spiritual life means fighting nature. Fighting nature. Whatever inclination we have for enjoyment that will pull the mind away from God, we have to fight against that. And for Thakur, it's a very simple thing. Don't place yourself in the situation where temptation will be there. Remove yourself from that situation. It'll make it much easier. What an austere rule, M thinking to himself, is laid down for a sadhu. He may slip from his ideal by associating intimately with women. How can an ordinary man expect to attain liberation unless such a high ideal is set by holy men? This is another thing that Thakur used to say, even with himself. He said for himself, he had no possible danger of having any type of fall. In fact, he liked the company of the women devotees. He would sing for them and laugh and everything, enjoy it. But if others were there and there were women there, he would say that after a while I'll ask them to go visit the temples. And if they don't want to do that, then he himself would leave. Because he knew that he was setting the example. Now I understand why, M to himself. Chaitanya punished his disciple, the younger Haridas. This was a very famous incident in the life of Chaitanya Deva. So severely. He was a young future monastic, Haridas. And one day he took food from an elderly, very pious elderly Brahmin widow and got kicked out because of that. Because Thakur had told him not, Chaitanya Deva had told him not to have any contact with women at all. In spite of his teacher's prohibition, Haridas conversed with the widow devotee, but he was a sannyasi. Therefore, Chaitanya banished him. See, he wasn't allowed to come to mix with any of the disciples or devotees. What a severe punishment. How hard is the rule for one who has accepted the life of renunciation. Again, what love the Master cherishes for his devotee. He is warning him even now, lest he should run into danger in the future. Shadhu Shabdhan, beware, holy man. These words of the Master echoed in the hearts of the devotees like the distant rumbling of thunder. The Master went with the devotees to the northeast veranda of his room. Among them was a householder from the village of Dakshineswar who studied Vedanta philosophy at home. He had been discussing Om with Kedar. We met Kedar before, Kedarnath. He was interested in everything. Thakur said at one time, what was it? He likes to draw water from many wells. He used some expression like that. He used to go to Kartabhaja, but very, very devoted to Thakur. He had been discussing Om with Kedar before the Master. He said, this eternal word, the Anahata Shabda. Anahata is the only sound that's not the result of one thing striking another. Every sound is the result of either with the vocal cords, or if it's a drum or anything like that. One thing strikes something and some vibration comes, it hits the ear, and that's the sound. Om is the only sound that's not like that. It's the initial sound of Brahman. It's one with the Brahman. And here there are lots of philosophical ideas about this Anahata Shabda. This eternal word, the Anahata Shabda, is ever present both within and without. Many people can hear that. Anahata Dhwani. Swami Turiyananji, he went through a period where he could hear it. Thakur could hear it. Music of the spheres, they say sometimes. Or that sound, that word or sound from which creation itself comes. The Shabda Brahman. Master, but the word is not enough. Now, Thakur always likes to push the other side of things so that people don't become too one-sided. And they see both sides of a situation in both positions. Because many times he'll say, yes, repeating the name of Rama, very good, this is what he teaches, this is enough. But now he's saying, there must be something indicated by the word. So there's the word, and what is referenced by the word. So we have the word chair. If we don't know what a chair is, then repeating the word chair doesn't mean anything to us. We have to know what the reference is, pratipadya. There'll be something that it stands for, that it represents. So he says, there must be something indicated by the word. Can your name alone make me happy? Unless we know the person, somebody tells us somebody's name, we don't know who the person is, it doesn't mean anything. Complete happiness is not possible for me unless I see you. Devotee, the eternal word itself is Brahman. And now this is a good explanation, because the Om doesn't stand for anything other than itself. It is Brahman. It's not a reference. It doesn't have a meaning the way other words have a meaning. There's no second thing that it indicates. If we say it indicates Brahman, but it is Brahman. It's the sound itself is supposed to be identical with the Brahman, not a conventional word that stands for Brahman. This is the theory behind it. Master to Kedar, oh, don't you understand? He upholds the doctrine of the rishis of olden times. They once said to Rama, because what he's saying is that it doesn't stand for God or any personal God, that it's infinite absolute. This transcendent reality with no name and no form or anything. So the real standpoint of the jnani. So he upholds the doctrine of the rishis of olden times. They once said to Rama, O Rama, we know you only as the son of Dasharatha. Let sages like Bharadwaja worship you as God incarnate. We want to realize Brahman, the individual, existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute. At these words, Rama smiled and went away. So he was fine with that. That's okay. But when God comes in human form, when a soul like Rama is born, and they don't recognize him, or they don't take advantage of him, or think of him only as having taken human birth, then they're missing out on this joy that will come through the realization and understanding. Master, seriously. Oh, sorry. Then Kedar says, those rishis could not recognize Rama as an incarnation of God. They must have been fools. Kedar, sometimes he speaks without thinking too much. Master, seriously, please don't say such a thing. People worship God according to their tastes and temperaments. So now we're getting the very liberal doctrine. The mother cooks the same fish differently for her children, that each one may have what suits his stomach. So now he's going to back this other devotee. This is his attitude. It's a good attitude. It may not be your attitude. It may not be full-fledged understanding God in every possible way, but one can realize God this way also. The mother cooks the same fish differently for her children, that each one may have what suits his stomach. For some she cooks the rich dish of palau, but not all the children can digest it. For those with weak stomachs, she prepares soup. Some again like fried fish or pickled fish. It depends on one's taste. The rishis followed the path of jnana, of knowledge. Therefore, they sought to realize Brahman, the indivisible existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute. But those who follow the path of devotion seek an incarnation of God to enjoy the sweetness of bhakti. Now, in Sri Ramakrishna's case, he worshipped the Divine Mother. That was his form of bhakti. Not that he didn't accept the avatars, but in general, most of the devotional movements revolve around this idea of the avatar, the worship of Rama and Krishna especially. The darkness of the mind disappears when God is realized. In the Purana, it is said that it was as if 100 suns were shining when Rama entered the court. Why then weren't the courtiers burned up? It was because the brilliance of Rama was not like that of a material object. As the lotus blooms when the sun rises, so the lotus of the heart of the people assembled in the court burst into blossom. As the Master uttered these words, standing before the devotees, he suddenly fell into an ecstatic mood. His mind was withdrawn from external objects. No sooner did he say, "The lotus of the heart burst into blossom," than he went into deep samadhi. He stood motionless, his countenance beaming, and his lips parted in a smile. Good. We can stop with this image in our minds of Thakur on his birthday, with all the devotees there in this ecstatic mood, and everyone enjoying the bliss of Thakur's presence, and they were all friends and even related to each other. So really a very wonderful thing to meditate on and to reflect on. This is one of the things when we read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, it's not just for the teachings, is to reenact this play that actually happened, that took place, to recreate that and to relive it, and to feel that we're there with them. And we're there on Thakur's birthday today, so it's a very nice day for that. Okay, let us close with our chant. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukam Bhadhvadvigraham Vari Ishavataram Parameshamediam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.